Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a question. The incoming Trump administration is weighing options to end the Russia-Ukraine war, but what does it mean for Europe? Let's get to the bottom line. For almost 3 years, there was no doubt about U.S. support for Ukraine in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But that was under a Democratic Party administration, which spent almost $60 billion to support Ukraine since the war began in February 2022. NATO allies have also devoted as much in cash, in weapons, and other economic support since the beginning of the conflict. Now, as power changes hands to the Republican Party, things are changing rapidly. President-elect Donald Trump has promised to end the Russia-Ukraine war quickly. He even said he could end the war in 1 day. But what would that look like? And how is the shifting U.S. position playing out in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, where Russia is literally right next door? Today, we're talking with Jan Lipavsky, Foreign Minister of the Czech Republic, on this special edition of the show, coming to you from the Doha Forum in Qatar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Look, I want to ask you about Czechia's strategic dashboard and your hierarchy of concerns. And I imagine the Russia-Ukraine conflict is high on that. Are you worried about the direction this conflict may go with President Trump having been elected in the United States and having potentially a softer line on Russia than Joe Biden had?
First of all, I would not say that Donald Trump will have a softer line on Ukraine or Russia. We have not heard fully his plans or visions for conflict resolution in Europe. And speaking of hierarchy of concerns or the political priorities, as we could rephrase it, for Czechia, it is the transatlantic bond. We are a country with a rich history. Not all of that was good. And the worst thing was brought by Russian control over the eastern and central part of Europe, including at the time Czechoslovakia. And I don't want to repeat that. So for this not to happen, the transatlantic bond and the European architecture, security architecture is very important. So we are behaving like that. We have an ammunition initiative. We have sent 500,000 shells to Ukraine this year. In overall number is much higher. We will spend 2% of GDP on defense. And my personal ambition is to limit the Russian influence in Europe. We need to show Russian where the borders are.
Can you go a little bit further with what you've done to support Ukraine? And I know Ukraine has said that it hopes to get more from Czechia, that it expected more from Czechia. I know there's a lot of discussion about ammunition and whatnot. But from my trips to Eastern Europe, I know that there's enormous support, enormous cash, arms flows. But can you make this more tangible for viewers who may not understand how deep this support has been?
So the Czech support to Ukraine, it's a wide range of activities, political support on the diplomatic front, it's economic support through EU money, it's military support. We not only sell arms, but also provide and gift quite a lot of ammunition and arms. So it is a comprehensive support which goes from Czechia towards Ukraine. A lot of humanitarian and development aid, for example, for displaced people in Ukraine.
I mean, the early word we've heard from President Trump and some of the people that are around him, like Mike Waltz, the incoming national security advisor, is an expectation that they're going to pressure European nations to do more to support Ukraine, to basically keep in the game, if you will. And I'm just wondering how that will go over with citizens in Europe.
Europe has resources to help Ukraine. Europe even have resources to stop the war. We, as a Europe, maybe a little bit lack a political will. So the Donald Trump will provide external push on that. The security of Europe, not only Ukraine as a nation, is at stake. So we should take it seriously and be ready to find those resources.
So, Minister Lipavsky, I've just talked about Europe kind of as a single entity. I think from my experience of starting in Western Europe and moving across Eastern Europe, the intensity of feeling and passion about this topic changes and shifts. Is there a real problem inside Europe that your neighborhood, for the most part, is one that's really feeling the tension about Ukraine, Russia, and others are coasting along?
I'm very careful criticizing my neighbors and,
Well, I just want to know the facts or what's reality.
friendly nations of Europe. But the reality is that we need to do more and we need to find resources. This will be a difficult debate in the EU. There are certain states which are clearly dedicated to stop Russia and Ukraine and in Europe as such, Poland, Baltic states. For example, Czech Ammunition Initiative, which physically delivered ammunition to front lines this year, 500,000 rounds. It's a cooperation between Czechia, Denmark, and Netherlands, and many other contributing nations. And then we have these big players. We really struggle with leadership. There will be elections soon in Germany. We have government in France without confidence right now. This is not helping, but those are situations which needs to resolve somehow. But on the other side, we have a new leadership of NATO, Mark Rutte, doing a terrific job. We have a new European Commission. President Ursula von der Leyen continues. And for example, Vice Chair Kaja Kallas is doing also a very good job. So not everything is going good, not everything is going bad. We have to continue. We have to be really dedicated to stop Russia.
Do you think there's a blind spot out there about a growing resentment, antipathy about Ukraine? We've just seen in the Romanian election the surprise emergence of a character very few people knew about, who's deeply anti-NATO. And I find it so interesting because the Deputy Secretary General of NATO was from Romania. Mircea Giona was one of the candidates, didn't do so well in the election, but a kind of anti-NATO, pro-Russian nationalist won this election. That election's now been annulled because of the concerns about Russian meddling, deep meddling in social media. How do you feel about that election and the decision by the court to undo it? And do you have concern that there's this really substantial portion of publics inside these countries in Eastern Europe that is somehow moving in another direction when it comes to Russia, Ukraine?
80% of false information and disinformation activities in Europe emanates from Russia, has Russian origin. So Russia is not waging not only physical war in Ukraine, killing everyday people, kids, women, destroying hospitals and cities, but they also want to destroy minds of European citizens through these disinformation campaigns. So the situation in Romania is very fresh. So now we are gathering all the information, and I'm in touch with people on that. So I don't have a direct comment. It's very concerning, and it's not usual that the Constitutional
You're not going to
Court
comment on whether you think it was good to annul the election?
It's not usual that the Constitutional Court would scrape the first round of elections. So probably there must be a strong reason, but I'm waiting for some information.
You have been out there and saying that there have been over 100 major incidents in Europe of mischief directly related to Russian actions. Can you tell us more?
Yes. It's a clear indication that the number of suspicious events is growing. The Russian aggressivity of the secret services and the proxies is growing. So we even had an incident in Prague when some person was manipulated via Telegram to do some kind of thing, to burn something, to make publish outrage. They were not successful. But why is Russia doing that? Why they did the same in Poland and the Baltics? Why we have so many cases of espionage? Why we need to PNG all the time some diplomats? So we need to stop that.
Why is the West so passive and taking this without engaging in disinformation campaigns in Russia? Why is there not more of an aggressive counter-response to basically lay the terms that if you, in Russia, Vladimir Putin, do these things in Europe and the United States and elsewhere, that you run the risk of them being done to your own population? Because the United States used to be pretty good at meddling in other, economies.
So I would not say that the West is passive. It's too broad, it's a too general statement. Different countries are doing different jobs, and there's a different level of sensitivities in different societies. And still the threshold was not overcome. This is the reason why it is called hybrid warfare. It's something which is not warfare as such. So the societies are less seeing that. And this is part of my job to say, look, this is a serious situation. We have to do something. And my proposals, for example, to limit the movement of Russian diplomats in the Schengen area, exactly directs in this direction, goes in this direction.
I'm not saying that this is an overt desire of Donald Trump, but I've heard it from some of the people around him that he may have a desire in the next few years to host something like a state dinner for Vladimir Putin in Washington, of trying to bring the U.S. and Russian interests back together. And they argue that that might be a small price to pay if he can get Russia to stop engaging in aggressive behavior against its neighbors. Would that be something that would give you heartburn?
Putin is not interested in dinners. Putin is interested to destroy Ukraine as a state, Ukrainians as a nation, and Zelensky as a president. He wants to erase Ukraine from the map. This is the Putin's real dinner. So I don't want to comment on any possible or speculative scenario of diplomatic exchange between US and Russia. Of course, it's okay that those two states have diplomatic relations, and that's a speculative.
You recently met with a group of European foreign ministers and had a discussion. Much of it dealt with Ukraine and what both red lines there would be and what plans of action would be. How solid do you think the group is?
You mean like the NATO or the EU? NATO is very solid. The Article 5 is a strong thing, and we have to work on it. I think the most important thing is that NATO is now working on new defense plans. So we see what the Russian armies are about and the other threats, the terrorism, and we look into what our capabilities are. And the message is clear. We have to invest more into defense. The message that the 2% are not ceiling. It's just the baseline which should be fulfilled by everyone, and more of this debate will come.
From your perspective, after listening to President Zelensky often on his aspirations for NATO membership sooner than later, but hearing from both European leaders and American leaders, maybe it needs to later, be later than sooner on NATO membership. But when you think about a potential deal, something along the lines that General Kellogg, who's coming in to be an envoy for the president of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, is looking at some territorial freeze, some freeze in the conflict to begin to negotiate, but basically taking off the table NATO membership for some time. What kind of formula do you think might work?
So, first and foremost, we have to stop Putin for once, not to give him a pause, to take a breath, and then continue. In 1938, it was Munich Agreement, which was supposed to stop, to give Sudetenland, part of Czechoslovakia, to Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler said, this is my last demand. I won't demand anything more. And we know that it was just incentive to start the Second World War, to attack Poland, to attack France, and to then Soviet Union. So we have to stop it and solve it as a peace which will be just and lasting. If we do some kind of freeze, Russia will be able to produce weapons, train more soldiers, and build up their armies, and then continue again. So that would be a biggest mistake if we just pause it.
What is that dynamic, Minister Lipavsky? What would be that dynamic to genuinely stop it? Because that would involve some dimension of deterrence, some dimension of much more serious armed forces defending whatever lines you draw, other than just leaving the Ukrainians to themselves to do that.
I like the term peace through strength. And that's about security guarantees. So that's the discussion we have now in Europe, how the security would be guaranteed.
Security guarantees?
And that's the discussion. What would be the form of the guarantees? Some say it is a NATO membership. So Czech position is okay. Yes, NATO membership is the strongest possible guarantee. And then you have many other possible. But now, every day, there is a fighting. Russia loses more than 1,000 soldiers every day. Every day. And Ukrainians are losing soldiers too. We don't know the exact figure. But if Russia is losing 1,000, it will be also quite a significant number on the Ukrainian side. So I think the ultimate goal should be to stop it, not just pause it.
So what do you see as the Czechia's unique role in this moment, trying to basically broker this? I'm sort of interested in what role you as a foreign minister are playing at this moment broadly. Are you going along with the flow of other nations, or are you able to put ideas on the table yourself? Is there anything proactive you're doing in this conflict?
So the role of Czechia is to be a reliable partner, good ally, and to do our homeworks and take our fair share. 11 million country, so we can do something. We can do change like the ammunition initiative or the humanitarian help. Of course, I try to bring new ideas to glue together what can be done. So that's how I see the role of Czechia.
I mean, to me, you sound quite hawkish on Russia and drawing lines. There are some domestic dependencies that Czechia has on Russia, particularly in oil and energy still. Can you talk to us about that? How do you remain dependent on Russia? I'm not saying you want to be, but you are dependent on it at the same time of drawing laws. I just even don't know how you would manage that geopolitically and from an economic perspective. How is that going? And how are you making progress in cutting off that dependency?
So the current government made a clear decision right after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine that we will get rid of all the dependency on Russian energy. And gas was solved. We have some capacity terminals in Germany and Netherlands. We can get LNG. We will get rid of the Russian oil next year. So there is no contradiction. We don't want to be dependent on someone who wants to murder you at the same time.
Do you fear at all a kind of strategic contraction of U.S. commitments around the world? That one of the things I think President Trump represents is a frustration of a lot of Americans that somehow they play a security guarantor in the world, but China has come out ending up a winner in their eyes, that American manufacturing got hollowed out, that there were a lot of trade-offs that were very uncomfortable for America. It's made the security equation much, much more complicated. And I'm just interested in, as you look at it as someone who's close to the United States, watches the United States, values the relationship, are you worried about it becoming dimmer to some degree because of American populism rising right now?
I don't have a definitive answer for that, but two main observations. It was Donald Trump who pushed the agenda of 2% GDP spending on defense during his first term in NATO.
And you applaud that.
And we applaud that, and it's now being fulfilled. And things are getting better, and Europe is investing on defense. I would say this is a positive thing. And the other thing is that the conflicts in the world are not a separate one anymore.
So as you see this, and you're sitting here in Doha, we've got delegations here from Russia. We have delegations from Iran. We have representatives here from Syria.
And from Czechia.
And from Czechia.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of a major, major forum here. And it's not that everything would be resolved here, but I'm just wondering, you think that the sensitivities are in the right place regarding how much worse everything could get? You know, today in the Middle East, we're seeing what's going on in Lebanon, we're seeing Israel, Gaza, we're seeing, breakdowns in Syria. How worried are you about a repeat of history?
We should learn from history, not to repeat it. That's a very famous quote. It's important to have a place like Doha, to have different kind of conferences and international organizations, because the real frontline soldiers of peace are diplomats talking to each other, solving issues. And if they fail, then we witness the military action. So if we want to get rid of the military actions and war, we need to talk to each other. But it has to be a reasonable discussion. And in case of Russia, Russia is not willing to discuss, and their representatives said it multiple times that they tell you the following line: we are ready to talk with America about world affairs, not with Zelensky about how to withdraw from Ukraine. So we should listen to that language, and until that to have this a big stick, so then we can speak softly.
I want to ask this question carefully, but I know you have a very special relationship with some of your neighbors, the Visegrad countries, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Czechia. And it seems that used to be a bastion of, democratic activity. It seems to be slipping. Slovakia has a rising populist trend and a populist government that came in. I think it's populist government under Prime Minister Fico. And you have in Hungary, of course, Viktor Orban, who seems to be on a demonstrably different track than much of the rest of Europe and has not been expelled, is still in. But is there a brewing problem in your neighborhood when it comes to how these countries not only look at Russia, but look at China? Right now, a lot of countries are worried about China's rise and how to manage that. And I'm interested in how that is handled from a U.S. perspective as well as a transatlantic perspective. What are your thoughts?
So on Visegrad, it was created in the times...
Long ago.
30 years ago, after fall of communism. And it was big names like Czech President Václav Havel or Polish President Lech Walesa. And it was created with the vision that those 4 Central European countries will together join NATO and the EU. And this promise was fulfilled, and we were very successful in cooperating. And there were good times and bad times for Visegrad, but now we have a major disagreement in interpretation of the security situation in Europe. Czechia and Poland, let's say that we see things in a quite clear way. Russia wants to destroy the security order in Europe. So we find the agreement with Slovakia and Hungary, for example, in NATO or in the EU. But this is the limit of the agreement, and there is not much space for more agreeing. So the Visegrad cooperation continues.
But it's not just about that. It's also about...
It's a cultural cooperation.
It's also, some people look at Viktor Orban as an autocrat, coming to power and, disenabling democratic institutions.
We will see.
Just worried about that. Is that concern overplayed?
In a year and a half in Hungary there will be elections, and the Orban is not currently winning in the polls. So let's see how that will go.
Let me ask you finally. You were in Ukraine recently, and you met President Zelensky, and you gave him a book.
Yes.
I'd like to know what the book was. Share it with our viewers.
This is a beautiful.
You remember what the book? You gave me a book about Václav Havel's Prague. Was that what you gave him?
This book was not a tour guide for President Zelensky. We are ready to invite President Zelensky as a tourist to Prague when the war is over, when his official duties
I can lend him my book.
Over. I gave him a book of Russian fairy tales. Russia is lying every day. Lavrov is lying every day. And we wanted to show to people that this pro-Kremlin fairy tales are really fairy tales, and to give some fact check to those lies. So it's in a funny way. This is a set of social media posts which makes fun of the Russian liars.
What was President Zelensky's reaction?
He was surprised, he was happy, and he liked it, and he would like to see the Ukrainian version.
Well, Mr. Foreign Minister, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So what's the bottom line? U.S. President-elect Donald Trump may be able to work with Russia's red lines on Ukraine, but to most European governments, it may sound like appeasement or conciliation and a direct threat to the principle of state sovereignty. The further east you go in Europe, the more folks are nervous about what a deal with Russia on Ukraine may look like. Don't forget, they're in the neighborhood of Ukraine, and they were subjugated by the USSR, the Soviet Union, for the longest time. America has no strategic interest in giving away everything to Russia, but it could go either way. Some voices in the Trump White House are solidly against any Russian advances. Yet there are other voices arguing that this conflict really isn't one for America to keep investing in. The difference between them is stark, but that's what lies ahead. And that's the bottom line.